So if you set it up correctly, when you actually go to install your bindings and you cut your binding channels correctly, you should be just proud of the surface of the sides and the surface of the top of the back, okay? So that your binding is just a hair tall of those, and you're able to remove that fairly quickly and easily without marring the sides or marring the top or something along those lines. If you cut them too shallow, or too deep, I should say, if you cut them too deep, then your binding won't cover what you need it to cover. So you want to make sure that you're just a skosh, tiny bit, shy, to make sure that your bindings are proud all the way around. And then you can go back and clean it up. Okay, I forgot to mention, if you're doing a binding that has some purfling that will show on the back or the top, it's a little bit more complicated than what I'm doing, there's two methods. Well, there's really three methods of getting those in there. If your purfling is the same depth as your binding, you can cut your depth of channel to both the purfling and the binding at the same time. Just make sure you mark it and then test it. If your purfling is a thin strip that doesn't go the depth of the binding, then you can either do one of two things. You can either cut the purfling channel before you cut the binding channel and inlay the purfling beforehand, which might be preferable because you don't have to go as deep into the top or the back, and then you already have a piece of top or back to help keep the purfling in place. If you feel confident pulling out that area. This is much like what it would be involved in installing purfling on a violin, where you mark and you remove just that 1.5 millimeters of material, depth and width, and then you put the purfling in and then shave it down to height. That's one way. The other way is if your purfling is not the same depth as your binding, is to cut the binding channel and then remove the material that you would remove for the purfling. And then when you go to glue up, you work on gluing both of them in at the exact same time. So you would have a shelf for both. And I don't have an example of that, but that's another way to do it. So again, you could either cut the binding channel later, do the purfling first, and then cut the binding channel, or you can do both of them at the same time, cutting both depth and width of the parts that you need. I'm not sure which would be more difficult on that. I generally try to have purfling and binding to be the same depth so that I can cut it all in one, take out one block, and then put it all in. I have not noticed a difference in sound quality when doing that, so for what that's worth. Alright, I do want to remind you to try to keep a good, clean work surface as you go. You are going to be making little pieces of wood come off in all directions, and they are going to get surfaces dirty. So now I have set up this, I've tested it on my scrap and made sure that it is the exact width that I want. I have marked the sides and all the way around where I want the depth of my binding to be. And now I'm going to come around and I'm going to very carefully, keeping this exactly perpendicular to where my cut is, I'm going to go all the way around, cutting my millimeter and whatever. You got to be very careful in this area of the waist to make sure that you are staying exactly perpendicular to your cut. This is why we had to cut the sides or flush, or the sides of the top and the back flush with the sides. I'm going to kind of come around so that you can see. So I'm just making a line all the way around the edge. So you get the idea. All the way around. That will look, same idea down here. Okay. I'll continue around and see what we get from there. Again, I'm going with the grain of the wood. Don't go against it. You'll be fighting the whole time. Okay, here's the back. Since mine's the same on the top and the back, I don't even have to adjust this at all, so we'll just continue around. Top is much softer, so be very careful going through. Take a light pass and then a kind of repeated passes to make where you need it. Okay, I'm done marking. Now you will notice that there are some areas along here that you didn't get to mark. We will come back, and when we get ready to take that material out, we will mark with a straight edge and a razor, and then we will remove that with a chisel so that it takes away. So that's also the same down here. We're going to mark that with a razor blade and a straight edge, and then remove that excess with the chisel when we get there. So not too difficult. But that concludes this broadcast today, because it's time for me to go do something else for a little bit. So we are ready for the next thing.